Hello again. You might remember me from the previous video. I'm Amer Rebuttals, and now I'm going to talk to you about rebuttals and surrebuttals. There are some similarities between the rebuttal and the surrebuttal. So some of the stuff that I'm going to say about rebuttals will apply to surrebuttals, but I will tell you what the differences are as well. So first I'm going to talk about rebuttals, and second I'm going to talk about surrebuttals. So a rebuttal, before you get to the rebuttal, you would have been hearing opposing counsel respond to your argument for 14 minutes. And now you have the chance to defend it for 1 minute. You need to make that minute count. It's the last thing that the tribunal will hear from you. It needs to be the cherry on top of the sundae that is your argument. In order to do that, your rebuttal needs to be, 1, very brief and concise, and 2, it needs to be very strong and persuasive. It needs to be like a mic drop. If there are people in the room, not part of the tribunal, just an audience, they need to feel like, oh my God, this person just won the argument. They won the case. It needs to be that strong. Ideally, you should stick to 1 point only. Maybe you can get away with doing 2 very, very short points, but you should try your best to make it 1 very quick, sharp, strong point. And it needs to be very precise language. You want to say the point that you want to make in the least amount of words, making it very, very clear, precise. So one thing that sticks with the tribunal. Here's a tip that you can use, and this is what I used in Vienna as well, as to how to get to the best rebuttal possible. While listening to opposing counsel, you should obviously have a notepad in front of you. So what I recommend that you do is, every single time you hear a point that you think you can have a good rebuttal to, write it down. Write that point down and try to write what the response is going to be, but keep listening. And as you hear more and more points, write them all down. When you approach perhaps the 12th minute, you should by now have identified what the strongest rebuttal is going to be. And you should pick only 1 point. And then what I also highly recommend is for you to write down your response so you can see that it's as precisely phrased as possible. Obviously, there are time constraints here, so you need to be flexible, but this is just a general tip as to how to come about the best rebuttal that you can have. And rebuttals are similar to pleadings in terms of that you need to maintain your body language, your posture, the way you address the tribunal, and those points. So that still applies. Don't forget that you're still pleading, you're still talking to the tribunal. And now I'll move on to the second point of this video, which is surrebuttals. So being brief, being concise, being straight to the point, and having the strongest response that I talked about in the rebuttal now applies to the surrebuttal as well. But there is a significant difference between the rebuttal and the surrebuttal, and that is that you do not have 14 minutes to think of a surrebuttal. You only have 1 minute, and you need to be very quick on your feet. So how can you counter this disadvantage that you have on the surrebuttal? Well, you already know what the weak points of your argument are. And there's a high likelihood that the rebuttal will address one of those points. And so you need to have a response prepared to the weakest points. And this ties into your argument matrix, which is covered in a different video done by Mace and Liz. And once you identify what the weak links are for your argument, for the purposes of your pleading itself and for the purposes of your surrebuttal, what you need to do is prepare the best phrased response, shorthand response that you can have to that weak position that you already know. And third, you also need to be quick on your feet. And that only comes through practice, practice, practice. If you practice surrebuttals in online pleadings, in practice rounds with your teammates and pre-moots, you would have heard the many different rebuttals that people or other opposing counsels could have to your argument. And it is more likely that whatever surrebuttal you will face during your pleading will be one of those surrebuttals. But every single time in your practice rounds that you address a new rebuttal, you would practice the skill of thinking on your feet. And finally, you need to remember that you're ending the story on these issues. You're the last person to speak on these issues. This is a very powerful position that you have, and that's why you need to make sure that you do all the things that I mentioned to have the best possible surrebuttal. Good luck in your pleadings.